This video is for A-Level Media Studies for the Eduqas exam board. We're going to be looking at the Tide print advert, which could come up in component 1, section A or section B. So let's start off with media language and analysing the coding conventions of this particular advert. So this is quite a conventional advert for the time. In the 1950s, you would have found adverts with a lot of copy on them. Not so much copy on adverts these days. Some conventional things on there, such as the slogan, such as the key signifier in the middle, which is the main image. Notice that these images are drawn on. That would have happened a lot in the 1950s, that there would be hand drawings rather than photographs. A lot cheaper to produce and a lot easier to manufacture. We've also got images that are almost like a comic strip, telling you the benefits of using this particular washing powder. Let's think about who the target audience are. Obviously, this target audience are women, and women who would be at home doing the chores, doing the washing. We'll think about the context of the 1950s and the role of women in the 1950s a little bit later on in this video, but I'd definitely say the target audience for this particular advert are women and maybe housewives. If we look at the makeup of the actual advert itself and think about bath semiotics, there are various codes which will give us clues as to the meaning in the image. Various different symbolic codes. So let's have a look at some of the gesture codes in here. So we've got the key signifier of the lady sort of embracing the washing powder. You match this up with the hearts, the symbolic codes above that of the hearts, or we could call them semantic codes. In these two things marrying together would mean that she's in love with the washing powder. She has a relationship with the washing powder, so to speak, in that she's very fond of it. We then look at the anchorage above it. So here we see the slogan, Tide's got what women want. And this anchorage gives meaning to the image in that this woman really wants the Tide. She's embracing it, she's hugging it like she is a loved one. Obviously, in terms of representation, this is quite interesting to analyse, and we'll be doing that as well within this video. But let's stick with media language for now. Let's have a look at the direct address at the very top of this advert, where it says "You women." Quite a condescending tone these days. I think if an advert like this came out now, and there'd be a lot of controversy about it, and probably actually the ASA wouldn't allow it. It's a very condescending tone. It says "You women," so it's definitely addressing females, and it's sort of telling women the role that they should be playing within the household. Again, very interesting in terms of representation. This advert as well probably wouldn't be allowed these days in terms of the claims that it makes. Some very hyperbolic claims it's making in saying that it washes better than any other washing powder. These days, if you advertise that, you'd have to make sure you proved it scientifically. But this is suggesting that this one is better than any other within this sort of hyperbolic text in the box on this advert. We've actually got some more claims on here for some more evidence for the reader, where it says the world's cleanest, world's whitest, actually brightens colours. More claims from this washing powder without necessarily the scientific facts behind it, but it's there to convince the viewer that they're buying the right thing. But this is all hyperbole and a convention of adverts, especially within the 1950s. I remember this is the time before sort of television adverts. So you can see at the bottom we've got a little narrative created between two women who are hanging out there washing. This narrative is being created because they couldn't do that in sort of like a TV advert at the time. So it then sort of creates a sense of community, that it's not just one woman using the Tide washing powder, there's these two women who are using it together and talking about it. In looking at those sort of statements and claims to it being brighter and whiter, we can make reference to binary opposites. In that, in creating a narrative, Levi Strauss would suggest that the binary opposites are what drives the narrative forward through use of conflict. So in sort of causing a conflict between this washing powder and other washing powders and saying this one is better, then that narrative is going to be communicated to the audience and is going to help to sell the product. Now the representations are really interesting within this text, because here we see a woman being represented as a housewife, as somebody who is taking that role within the household and looking after the washing.
My husband isn't afraid to get his hands dirty, or his shirt. Good thing I've got Ajax. It takes lots of cleaning power to get his shirts this clean. Ajax. Now that's what I call a strong detergent.
Very stereotypical view. At the time in the 1950s, probably a more dominant view than we would see nowadays, and probably a more accepted view in terms of advertising and one that's communicated to audiences. So here we see a woman who is represented as loving her washing powder and really being pleased about having to do these chores. Now, the context of the 1950s is important because here we have a time post-war where men have returned from war, and people are sort of advertisers are advertising to men to say, now you're back, you've got some money in your pocket, let's go out and buy a new car, let's go out and have a new holiday. For women, it was about giving them machines that they could work with at home, so a toaster, a microwave, a washing machine, because from war comes advances in technology, and then the women who were sort of taking on the male roles as they went to war have now gone back into the household and are being sold these products for the house. So this kind of ties in with this idea of washing powder being sold to women who may be at home. Now, in getting a little bit sort of more sophisticated in our analysis, we could say that this is a hegemonic representation. What that means is, if you think about the concept of hegemony or hegemony, whichever way you want to say it, that women are being sort of communicated via the media to accept this as their role within society. So if we see more and more of these adverts, more and more women are going to accept this as their role in society rather than trying to vie for positions of power. So a media hegemony would suggest that the elite, the people who are in charge of society, the ruling classes, are then using the media to communicate those kind of messages to the audience. So it could be suggested that this is a hegemonic image where women are being represented as having the role of being in the household rather than a more powerful role than that, or a role outside of that environment. There are other stereotypes used in the advert as well, to do with hanging the washing out, to do with how the woman is dressed. She's dressed in very dainty clothes with a very stereotypical 50s hairstyle to look very feminine and very sort of appealing to women who want to look like her, and maybe to men who would like to be with her. So it's a very stereotypical image we're given of a 1950s housewife. Now, in terms of context, not all women would be happy to have this role thrust upon them of being the housewife. If you think about women who'd been taking on male roles or traditional male jobs during the wartime when the men were away, women may actually reject this kind of role. If we look at the reference to Rosie the Riveter, which is all about sort of female empowerment and feminism, here we've then got a very similar image, but this time we're replacing sort of a might and a fight for war with washing powder. So it's trying to sort of tap into women's independence, women's thrive for a good life because they deserve it, however, then linking it to household chores. Still thinking about representation, think about Gauntlet's ideas of identity, in that we often will consume media and it forms part of our identity construction. And in seeing these role models of women talking to each other, hanging out the washing, living sort of like a perfect life, if you like, then we may then try to identify with these characters. Considering Van Zoonen's ideas of gender stereotypes, this certainly does reinforce some ideas of women's role in society, but goes against some of the things that she talks about in the media being an avenue for change, because we're not seeing that here. We're seeing, even though women have gone to war, they performed in roles more traditional for men, we then sort of see a hark back to traditional female stereotypes. So in discussing Van Zoonen, make sure you do look at different sides of the argument. Also look at bell hooks theory, in that lighter skinned women in Western society are often favoured and seen as being more beautiful, more attractive than darker skinned women. This would definitely reinforce those ideas, and also link to the ideas of post-colonial theory, in that here we see sort of like white colonial power within this 1950s advert.